House has announced commitment from 73 U.S. companies that are joining a pledge to support action on climate change. The goals include reducing emissions by as much as 50%, reducing water usage by 80%, and buying 100% renewable energy. Also Tuesday at the UN Climate Change Conference in Paris, French President François Hollande said France will give African countries $2.1 billion over the next 4 years to develop renewable energy sources. Several heads of governments attending the summit Monday endorsed action to protect and restore forests. Brazil and Norway declared that they will extend their partnerships to preserve Brazil's rainforests, and Britain, Germany and Norway announced an aim to provide $1 billion per year for the next 5 years as incentive for countries to pursue emission reduction goals set out by the United Nations. Well, the UN Climate Summit is being called the largest gathering of world leaders in history. 6 years ago, climate talks in Copenhagen failed to reach a climate agreement, but there is optimism that this time the talks could yield a wide-ranging deal. VOA Europe correspondent Luis Ramirez reports from Paris.
The way leaders here see it, this gathering is their best chance to save the planet. Their call for action on the summit's opening day is urgent.
This is a pivotal moment for the future of your countries, your people, and our common home, our planet. You can no longer delay.
The goal? To cut emissions enough to reduce the warming of the world's temperature by 2 degrees Celsius. Not doing so, scientists warn, could mean droughts and devastating extreme weather events, melting polar ice, and rising sea levels. What's different at this summit is that each country has laid out at the start what it plans to do to meet the carbon emission goals. The world's largest polluter, China, committed to do its part by capping carbon emissions by 2030, but says nations should be allowed to set their own agendas.
The Paris Agreement should accommodate the national conditions of variation between countries and lay emphasis on practical results.
Delegates also began revealing details of how they will fund their pledge to boost climate-related spending by $100 billion in the next 5 years. Converting to greener sources of energy is an expensive prospect for everyone, but it's an even bigger burden for economies in transition. Russia has historically been a reluctant partner, but on Monday, it too made a commitment.
Russia will continue contributing to joint efforts on global warming prevention. By 2030, we hope to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 70% compared to the basis year of 1990.
Leaders gathered on day one, hoping an early show of unity at the start of this 2-week meeting will give the talks a strong push that will result in a historic agreement. Leaders gathered on day one, hoping an early show of unity at the start of this 2-week meeting will give the talks a strong push that will result in a historic agreement, which they hope will rescue the Earth. Luis Ramirez, VOA News, Paris.
Well, addressing the opening of U.S. President Barack Obama urged world leaders to rise to this moment in the fight against climate change as he addressed the opening of the United Nations Climate Summit in Paris. VOA White House correspondent Aru Pande has more from the French capital, which is still reeling from the November 13 terrorist attack.
Less than an hour after landing in Paris, President Obama paid tribute to those killed when Islamic State gunmen opened fire on concertgoers at the Bataclan Theater nearly 3 weeks ago. Later on Monday, the U.S. leader saluted the people of Paris for insisting the UN climate conference take place in the aftermath of the attack.
An act of defiance that proves nothing will deter us from building the future we want for our children.
Talk of a low-carbon future dominated the summit, with Obama calling on world leaders to secure a long-term climate agreement with regularly updated targets, not a stopgap solution.
One of the enemies that we'll be fighting at this conference is cynicism. The notion we can't do anything about climate change.
On the sidelines of the summit, Obama secured the support of leaders of the world's largest carbon emitters. China's President Xi Jinping.
We have both determined that it is our responsibility to take action.
and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
That we agree that Paris must recognize and protect the ability of countries like India to pursue the priorities of development, growth, and poverty eradication.
President Obama also held closed-door talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin, where he reiterated the need for Russia to refocus its efforts in Syria against Islamic State and not the moderate opposition. White House Deputy National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes.
In the last several weeks, we've seen efforts by Russia to target ISIL, whereas there were very little at all before that. However, we also continue to see Russian operations that target other elements of the opposition.
Obama also called for de-escalation between Russia and Turkey after Ankara's recent downing of a Russian jet, a point White House officials say the president will reaffirm during talks with his Turkish counterpart on Tuesday. Aru Pande, VOA News, Paris.
Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. Check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory.